Before you scroll, the ancient Greeks, the people who invented democracy, philosophy, and the Olympics, also wrote stories where a man was personally visited by karma, via his own horses eating him, where a woman was turned into a permanent ocean drain for stealing cattle, and where the most beautiful human ever born came out of a tree. And that's not even in the top 10 weirdest ones on this list. Stick around, because all 49 of these are completely real, and they get so much worse. And if this already broke your brain, smash that new hype button right now. It's YouTube's brand new way to show love and help us reach more unhinged history fans, just like you. 1. Surely the king of all gods, ruler of lightning and commander of the entire universe, had the most dignified and powerful ways of doing everything. The truth is, Zeus once fell for a mortal woman named Leda, and his master's seduction plan was transforming himself into a swan, a real feathered, honking, waddling bird. Showed up as poultry, and it worked perfectly. The most powerful being in existence chose to be a bird as his first and best option, and ancient Greece documented it without a single question. 2. Narcissus is remembered as someone who simply loved himself a little too much, which sounds harmless enough. What actually happened is Narcissus walked past a pond, saw his own reflection, and fell so deeply in love with his own face that he sat down and never got back up. He stayed beside that pond for weeks, refusing food, refusing to move, slowly dying while staring at water. The most beautiful man in ancient Greece was defeated not by a monster or a god, but entirely by a puddle. 3. Tantalus is remembered as a king who had direct access to the gods, dined with them regularly, and lived a life most mortals could only dream about. What actually happened is Tantalus invited the gods to his dinner party and served them his own son cooked as a stew because he wanted to test whether they were truly all-knowing. The gods were so disgusted, they reassembled the boy and brought him back to life. A man cooked his own child as a party trick, and his entire legacy became a single vocabulary word. 4. Midas is celebrated as the king whose wish came true and who got everything he ever wanted. What actually happened is Midas received one divine wish and immediately chose for everything he touched to turn to gold. He reached for a grape. Solid gold grape. He reached for bread. Gold brick. He touched water. Liquid gold. He turned his entire meal into a metal collection and starved to death. The most envied king in mythology did not think food was worth including in his one single wish. 5. Sisyphus is remembered as the unlucky man cursed to roll a boulder uphill forever, which sounds like a simple, if exhausting, punishment. What actually happened is Sisyphus tricked and physically chained death itself so that nobody on Earth could die. Then, when he finally got caught, he negotiated his own release from the underworld not once, but twice, using pure audacity. The gods got so fed up, they gave him a boulder and a hill for eternity. The most punished man in mythology essentially speed ran, getting on every god's last nerve. 6. Pygmalion is remembered as a romantic who loved deeply and got rewarded for it, which sounds sweet and harmless enough. What actually happened is Pygmalion was a sculptor who fell so completely and obsessively in love with a statue he carved himself that Aphrodite took pity and brought it to life. He did not fall in love with a person, a nymph, or even a goddess. He fell in love with rocks he shaped with his own hands, and the universe rewarded him for it. Ancient Greece invented a whole new category of relationship status. 7. Apollo is worshipped as the god of music, arts, healing, and light, basically the most cultured and civilized god on the entire Mount Olympus roster. What actually happened is Apollo had a music competition with a satyr named Marsyas, won the contest fairly, and then skinned the man alive as his victory celebration. He was the god of healing and art simultaneously, and chose to end a music battle by committing the most violent act imaginable. The most cultured god in mythology celebrated winning a talent show by becoming the villain of a horror story. 8. Arachne is remembered as a gifted weaver who made the fatal mistake of challenging a goddess, which sounds like a simple lesson about humility and knowing your place. What actually happened is Arachne challenged Athena to a weaving contest, competed fairly, and won by creating a tapestry that exposed every single scandalous thing the gods had ever done. Athena lost the contest, could not handle it, and turned Arachne into a spider out of pure sore loser energy. Arachne made better art, told the truth, and got turned into a bug for being right. 9. Hephaestus is remembered as the blacksmith god, the builder, the craftsman who made legendary weapons and divine objects for the gods of Olympus. What actually happened is Hephaestus discovered his wife Aphrodite was cheating on him with Ares, built an invisible golden net to catch them both in the act, and then invited every single god on Mount Olympus to come and watch. Everyone laughed at him. Aphrodite continued the affair afterward. He built the most sophisticated trap in divine history, and the only thing it caught was his own dignity. 10. Heracles is celebrated as the greatest hero in all of Greek mythology, a demigod of impossible strength who completed 12 legendary labors as proof of his power. What actually happened is that one of those 12 heroic labors was cleaning a stable full of 30 years' worth of accumulated animal waste in a single day. He solved it by redirecting 2 entire rivers through the building. The greatest hero in history spent one of his most legendary days doing barn chores, and ancient Greece listed it proudly alongside slaying monsters and capturing gods. 11. Icarus is remembered as the boy who flew too close to the sun, a cautionary tale about ambition and not listening to your father. What actually happened is Icarus was given one single instruction before strapping on wings made of feathers and wax: do not fly too close to the sun. He immediately flew directly toward the sun with full commitment. The wax melted, the wings collapsed, and he fell straight into the sea and drowned. He had one rule, one warning, and 0 seconds of self-control. 12. Persephone is remembered as the goddess of spring, a gentle and beloved figure connected to flowers, growth, and the changing of seasons. What actually happened is Persephone got kidnapped and dragged into the underworld, and her mother Demeter responded by killing every single crop on Earth in protest. Every plant died. Every harvest failed. Humanity began starving globally. The gods panicked so hard they negotiated a formal shared custody agreement just to get the crops growing again. Winter exists on this planet entirely because a mother held a grudge and took it out on agriculture. 13. Actaeon is remembered as one of the finest hunters in ancient Greece, skilled, respected, and beloved by everyone who knew him. What actually happened is Actaeon was out on a completely normal hunting walk one afternoon when he accidentally wandered into a clearing where Artemis was bathing. She immediately turned him into a stag without a single warning or conversation. His own 50 hunting dogs, who had no idea what just happened, chased him down and ate him alive. He went for a casual walk, and his own pets killed him for it. 14. Tiresias is remembered as the greatest and most respected prophet in all of ancient Greece, a man whose wisdom guided kings and heroes alike. What actually happened is Tiresias became a prophet only after being turned into a woman for 7 years, simply for hitting 2 snakes with a stick. When the gods later asked him whether men or women enjoyed life more, he answered honestly that women did. Hera blinded him immediately for saying it out loud. The wisest man in Greece lost his eyes twice, once for snakes and once for telling the truth. 15. Prometheus is celebrated as the great titan who loved humanity so deeply that he defied the gods themselves to give people fire and civilization. What actually happened is Zeus responded to this act of kindness by chaining Prometheus to a mountain where an eagle flew down every single morning and ate his liver. Every night, the liver fully regrew. Every morning, the eagle returned for breakfast. This continued forever with perfect biological scheduling. The man who gave humanity fire received a permanent daily organ removal appointment with a bird as his eternal thank you. 16. Odysseus is celebrated as the greatest and most clever hero in all of Greek mythology, the man whose brilliance won the Trojan War and whose journey home became the most famous adventure ever told. What actually happened is that after 20 years of war and sailing, Odysseus arrived home to find 108 men camped inside his house, eating his food and pursuing his wife. He killed every single one of them that same night. His dog recognized him first and died immediately after from the shock of joy. Ancient Greece could not allow even the dog a happy ending. 17. Medusa is remembered as a terrifying monster with snake hair who turned people to stone with a single glance, one of the most feared creatures in all of mythology. What actually happened is Medusa was an ordinary woman who was turned into that monster as a punishment for being a victim of a crime inside Athena's temple. Perseus then cut off her head and used it as a weapon for years after her death, turning enemies to stone with her severed face. She was punished for something done to her and then weaponized afterward. The most overworked character in mythology never got a single day off. 18. Agamemnon is remembered as the great king who led the entire Greek army to Troy, the commander whose power and authority launched one of history's most legendary wars. What actually happened is that, before sailing to Troy, Agamemnon sacrificed his own daughter Iphigenia just to get favorable winds for his ships. His wife Clytemnestra remembered this for exactly 10 years in complete silence. The moment Agamemnon returned home victorious from Troy, she murdered him in his own bathtub. He survived an entire decade of war and was finished by his own bathroom on the first night back. 19. Dionysus is worshipped as the god of wine, celebration, and festivity, one of the most beloved and joyful figures in all of ancient Greek religion. What actually happened is that Dionysus was not born normally in any sense of the word. His mother died mid-pregnancy, and Zeus sewed the unborn baby directly into his own thigh to finish the development. Zeus then gave birth to a fully formed baby god out of his leg. Ancient Greece invented the concept of a leg delivering a child, and then named that child the god of parties, like nothing unusual had occurred. 20. Ajax the Greater is remembered as one of the mightiest warriors in all of Troy, second only to Achilles himself in strength, courage, and battlefield dominance. What actually happened is that after Achilles died, a contest was held to decide who would receive his legendary armor, and Ajax lost the decision. He went so completely insane with rage that he charged into a field and slaughtered an entire flock of sheep, believing they were his enemies. When he realized he had massacred a field of sheep, he was so overwhelmed with embarrassment that he killed himself. The second greatest warrior in Troy was ended by livestock confusion. 21. The Trojan War is remembered as one of the greatest and most devastating conflicts in all of human history. 10 years of brutal warfare, thousands of soldiers dead, and an entire civilization reduced to ash and rubble. What actually happened is that the entire thing started because a man named Paris stole another man's wife at a dinner party, and nobody thought to send a strongly worded letter first. One stolen guest at one dinner party launched 1,000 ships, and killed tens of thousands of people. Ancient Greece went from zero to naval warfare with no steps in between. 22. Argus is remembered as the most vigilant guardian creature in all of Greek mythology, a 100-eyed monster so perfectly designed for surveillance that nothing could ever escape his watch. What actually happened is Hermes defeated this indestructible 100-eyed giant not with weapons or strength, but by sitting beside him and telling the most aggressively boring stories imaginable until every single one of his 100 eyes fell completely asleep. Hermes then killed him. Hera collected all 100 eyes and placed them on the peacock's tail. Peacocks exist today entirely because a monster got bored to death by a bad storyteller. 23. Meleager is remembered as one of the greatest hunters in ancient Greece, the hero who organized and led the legendary Caledonian boar hunt that brought heroes from across the entire world together. What actually happened is that at his birth, the fates told his mother that he would live only as long as a specific log in her fireplace did not burn. She kept that log safe and protected for decades. After a family argument over who deserved credit for the boar hunt, she threw the log into the fire in anger. He dropped dead instantly. She burned the receipt and returned the product. 24. Orpheus is remembered as the greatest musician who ever lived in ancient mythology, a man whose music was so powerful it moved rivers, calmed wild beasts, and made stones weep with emotion. What actually happened is that his wife, Eurydice, died on their wedding day from a snake bite, and Orpheus played such devastatingly sad music that Hades himself wept and agreed to release her. The one condition was do not look back until you reach the surface. 3 feet from the exit, Orpheus looked back. She returned to the dead permanently. He had one job and failed it by 3 feet. 25. Bellerophon is remembered as one of the greatest heroes in all of Greek mythology, the man who tamed the legendary winged horse Pegasus and used him to slay the fire-breathing chimera that terrorized entire kingdoms. What actually happened is that after all those victories, Bellerophon decided he deserved to live on Mount Olympus with the gods and simply rode Pegasus straight toward it. Zeus sent a single horsefly to sting Pegasus mid-flight. Bellerophon fell all the way back to Earth, survived the fall, and spent the rest of his life wandering alone, crippled and blind. One horsefly ended the greatest career in mythology. 26. King Erysichthon is remembered as a powerful and wealthy ruler who commanded enormous resources and lived at the height of ancient privilege and comfort. What actually happened is that Erysichthon decided to chop down an entire sacred forest dedicated to Demeter just so he could build himself a party hall. Demeter cursed him with a hunger so catastrophic and unstoppable that no amount of food could ever satisfy it. He ate everything he owned, sold his own daughter repeatedly for food money, and eventually began eating himself alive. He destroyed a sacred forest for a party hall he never even finished building. 27. Pan is remembered as the cheerful god of nature, music, and wilderness, a beloved figure who wandered forests, playing his famous flute and spreading joy to all living creatures around him. What actually happened is that the Pan flute exists because Pan aggressively chased a nymph named Syrinx through the wilderness until she transformed herself into river reeds just to escape him permanently. He was so heartbroken by losing her that he cut those reeds and made a flute out of them. He still plays it. Every single Pan flute song ever performed is a restraining order origin story set to music. 28. Atalanta is remembered as the greatest female athlete in all of ancient Greece, a huntress and runner so fast and so skilled that no man in the known world could match her in competition. What actually happened is that Atalanta announced she would only marry a man who could beat her in a foot race, and every man who lost got executed. A man named Epaminondas won by throwing golden apples onto the track mid-race to distract her. She stopped every single time to pick them up. She lost the race, married the man, and handed over her entire legendary athletic career for apples. 3 apples. That was the price. 29. Theseus is remembered as the greatest hero of Athens. The legendary prince who volunteered to enter the deadly labyrinth, slew the monstrous Minotaur, and sailed home victorious to claim his rightful throne. What actually happened is that Theseus completely forgot to change his ship's sails from black to white on the way home. Black meant dead, white meant alive. His father Aegis saw the black sails from a cliff top, assumed his son had been killed, and threw himself into the sea. Theseus arrived home victorious to a funeral. One forgotten sail change orphaned the hero of Athens on his greatest day. 30. Cadmus is remembered as the legendary founder of Thebes, one of the most celebrated heroes in all of Greek mythology, whose deeds shaped the entire ancient world around him. What actually happened is that after killing a dragon, Cadmus was instructed to plant its teeth in the ground. Fully armed soldiers immediately grew out of the soil, ready for battle. Cadmus had no army and no plan, so he threw a single rock into the crowd. The soldiers assumed someone among them had thrown it and immediately killed each other entirely. He founded a great city by starting a group argument and watching quietly. 31. Chiron is remembered as the wisest and most noble centaur in all of ancient Greece. The legendary tutor who trained heroes, healed the sick, and held more knowledge than any creature alive. What actually happened is that Chiron was accidentally shot by Heracles with a poisoned arrow during a completely unrelated conflict that had nothing to do with him. Being immortal, he could not die, but the poison never stopped hurting. He eventually begged the gods to take his immortality away just to make the pain stop. The wisest being in all of mythology traded eternal life to end a single boo-boo. 32. Echo is remembered as a gentle mountain nymph with a beautiful voice who loved freely and lived among the forests and hillsides of ancient Greece without harming a single soul. What actually happened is that Echo was cursed by Hera to only ever repeat the last words spoken to her, never forming her own sentences again. She then fell hopelessly in love with Narcissus, who was too busy staring at his own reflection to notice she existed. She slowly faded away from heartbreak until nothing remained but her voice. She is still out there in caves repeating whatever the last passing stranger said. Eternal unpaid customer service with no resignation option. 33. Ares is worshipped as the mighty god of war, the most feared and ferocious divine force on all of Mount Olympus, a being whose very presence on a battlefield decided the outcome of entire civilizations. What actually happened is that 2 giant brothers named Otis and Ephialtes captured Ares, stuffed him inside a bronze jar, and left him there. The god of war sat trapped inside a jar for 13 full months. Nobody on Mount Olympus noticed he was missing until a neighbor heard screaming coming from the container. The most feared war god in history was defeated by a jar and forgotten about for over a year. 34. King Laius is remembered as the ruler of Thebes who received one of the most terrifying prophecies ever delivered in ancient Greek mythology, a warning so specific and so horrifying that any reasonable person would have taken immediate action. What actually happened is that Laius was told his own son would kill him and marry his wife, so he abandoned the newborn baby on a mountain with its ankles pinned together. The baby survived, grew up as a stranger, and killed Laius in a random road rage incident on a highway, where neither man recognized the other. He tried to cheat the prophecy and personally delivered every ingredient it needed. 35. Circe is remembered as one of the most powerful sorceresses in all of ancient mythology, a divine enchantress whose island was spoken about in terrified whispers by every sailor who had ever heard her name. What actually happened is that when Odysseus and his crew landed on her island, she immediately turned every single crew member into pigs the moment they walked through her door. Odysseus negotiated their return to human form, moved into her palace, and stayed on the island for a full year, enjoying himself. His crew had to physically beg him to remember they were trying to go home. 36. Scylla is remembered as one of the most terrifying sea monsters in all of ancient mythology. A six-headed creature that snatched sailors directly off passing ships and devoured them without mercy or hesitation. What actually happened is that Scylla was originally a beautiful sea nymph until a lovesick ocean god named Glaucus asked the sorceress Circe to make Scylla fall in love with him. Circe, who was in love with Glaucus herself, poisoned Scylla's bathing pool in jealousy instead. Scylla became the monster. Glaucus ended up with nobody. Every person in this story lost completely, and the sea got a new monster out of it. 37. Phaethon is remembered as the son of the sun god Helios, a young man who carried divine blood in his veins and burned with the ambition and pride that came with such an extraordinary heritage. What actually happened is that Phaethon begged his father to let him drive the sun chariot for exactly one day. He immediately lost control, veered wildly off course, and began scorching the entire earth from above. Zeus had to personally lightning bolt him out of the sky mid-drive to prevent a global catastrophe. His sisters cried so hard over his death that they literally transformed into poplar trees. One missed carpool destroyed an entire family tree, literally. 38. Endymion is remembered as a shepherd of extraordinary beauty, a mortal man so perfectly handsome that even the gods themselves could not ignore his presence on the hillsides of ancient Greece. What actually happened is that the moon goddess Selene became so obsessed with Endymion that she asked Zeus to put him into eternal sleep so she could visit him on his mountain every single night forever. He has been asleep for eternity. She visits a sleeping man on a mountain regularly, and ancient Greece wrote this down as one of their most beautiful and romantic love stories without a single concern. 39. The three fates are remembered as the most powerful and mysterious forces in all of ancient Greek mythology, divine beings whose authority exceeded even the gods themselves in matters of life and death. What actually happened is that the entire system governing every human lifespan across all of history consisted of three very old women managing yarn. One spun the thread, one measured it, and one cut it. That was the complete process. No appeals, no reviews, no second opinions. Every human life ever lived was length determined by a senior citizen with scissors deciding when she felt like snipping. The universe ran on craft supplies. 40. Antaeus is remembered as the most undefeatable giant in all of ancient mythology, a warrior so impossibly powerful that every hero who ever challenged him walked away broken, humiliated, and defeated without exception. What actually happened is that Antaeus drew every drop of his power directly from physical contact with the earth, and every time someone knocked him down, he hit the ground, recharged completely, and stood back up stronger than before. Heracles figured this out, picked him up off the ground, and just held him in the air until he went completely weak, then crushed him. The most undefeatable giant in history lost because someone gave him a hug. 41. Pelops is remembered as a celebrated hero and legendary king whose chariot racing victory became one of the most famous sporting triumphs in all of ancient Greek mythology. What actually happened is that Pelops won his race entirely by bribing his opponent's chariot mechanic to replace the axle pins with wax ones before the race began. The opponent's chariot collapsed at full speed, and he died on the track. Pelops then threw the mechanic into the sea to eliminate the only witness. He won through sabotage, covered it up with murder, and ancient Greece named their most famous peninsula after him anyway. 42. Glaucus the fisherman is remembered as an ordinary coastal man living a simple and unremarkable life along the shores of ancient Greece, completely unknown and entirely disconnected from the divine world above him. What actually happened is that one afternoon, Glaucus noticed fish he had caught were eating a strange herb growing on the ground and immediately jumping back into the sea alive. He ate the herb himself out of pure curiosity. He immediately transformed into an immortal fishman sea god and sank permanently into the ocean. He did not seek divinity, did not pray for it, and did not earn it. He just ate something weird off the ground. 43. Sisyphus the king had a son named Glaucus, who is remembered as a chariot racer who pushed the boundaries of competition further than any other athlete of his era in ancient Greece. What actually happened is that this Glaucus decided to feed his racing horses exclusively on human flesh because he believed it would make them faster and more aggressive than every competitor on the track. The horses eventually turned on him during a race and ate him using the exact same method he had been using on others. His horses finished the job he started, and ancient Greece considered this completely fair. 44. Autolycus is remembered as the most gifted and untouchable thief in all of ancient Greek mythology, a man so extraordinarily skilled at stealing that no lock, no guard, and no divine protection could ever stop him from taking whatever he wanted. What actually happened is that Autolycus could magically alter the appearance of anything he stole so completely that nobody could ever trace it back to him. He stole from everyone across his entire lifetime with absolutely zero consequences. His grandson was Odysseus, and his great-great-grandfather was Hermes, the god of thieves. Grifting was not a hobby in this family. It was a hereditary career spanning 4 generations. 45. Iphigenia is remembered as the daughter of the great king Agamemnon, a young woman whose story became one of the most debated and emotionally devastating tales in all of ancient Greek mythology. What actually happened is that her own father sacrificed her to get favorable winds for his war fleet sailing toward Troy. Artemis secretly swapped her for a deer at the last moment and hid her away as a priestess in a foreign land. Years later, her brother Orestes arrived at that same temple, not knowing who she was, and she nearly sacrificed him before they recognized each other. The same family almost sacrificed each other twice across 2 different decades. 46. Charybdis is remembered as one of the most terrifying nautical hazards in all of ancient mythology, a monstrous force so powerful that even the most experienced and heroic sailors steered their ships miles out of course just to avoid her waters. What actually happened is that Charybdis was originally just a woman whom Zeus transformed into a permanent ocean whirlpool as punishment for stealing cattle. She now swallows the entire sea 3 times daily and spits it all back out on a fixed schedule for eternity. The punishment for stealing livestock in ancient Greece was becoming a permanent drain for the entire ocean forever. 47. The Minotaur is remembered as the most terrifying monster in all of ancient Greek mythology, a half-man, half-bull creature locked inside an inescapable labyrinth and fed with human sacrifices delivered from Athens every single year. What actually happened is that the Minotaur only existed because King Minos refused to sacrifice a bull that Poseidon had specifically sent him as a gift. Poseidon responded by making Minos' wife fall in love with the bull. The Minotaur was the result of that situation. Minos then built a labyrinth to hide his shame and fed Athenian teenagers to it annually. One unpaid divine debt created a decade of teenager murder, 48. Cassandra is remembered as the princess of Troy who possessed the gift of perfect and complete prophecy, able to see every future event with total accuracy before it ever happened to anyone around her. What actually happened is that Apollo gave her this gift, and then when she rejected his advances, he cursed her so that nobody would ever believe a single word she said. She predicted the fall of Troy loudly and repeatedly to everyone who would stand still long enough to listen. Nobody listened. They wheeled the wooden horse inside the gates anyway. She watched her entire city burn, having been completely right about absolutely everything from the very beginning. 49. Myrrha is remembered as a tragic figure from ancient Greek mythology, whose story begins with a curse, descends immediately into chaos, and ends in a transformation so bizarre that even by Greek mythology standards, it stands completely alone. What actually happened is that Myrrha was cursed to fall in love with her own father, tricked him in the dark, was discovered, fled in absolute terror, and begged the gods to make her neither alive nor dead. They turned her into a myrrh tree. She gave birth to Adonis from inside the tree trunk. Adonis grew up so extraordinarily beautiful that Aphrodite and Persephone both fought over him, and he was eventually killed by a wild boar. The most beautiful human in history was born from a tree and eaten by a pig, and that is ancient Greece, a civilization that gave us philosophy, democracy, and architecture, and also a man who got turned into a stag by a goddess because he took a wrong turn on a hiking trail. If any of this made you question everything you learned in history class, then you are exactly where you belong. Hit like, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications because we are just getting started. Drop a comment below and tell us which myth broke your brain the most. We are reading every single one.